So this is a Brexit video, and I try to avoid making Brexit videos because, frankly, I find the subject depressing. Um, but of course, it is the dominant political issue in this country over the entire May Premiership, and it will be, the dominant issue probably for the next year at least. Um, so I can't really avoid it. As an issue, as a topic. Um, I voted Remain, and I absolutely do not regret my vote. I would probably vote Remain again, but that does not mean I am some sort of unlike some Remainers, I don't love the EU. I can see its flaws. There was a big demonstration in London today, organised by Open Britain, which is a successor to the Remain campaign, and they're demanding that the public get a vote on the terms of Brexit. Today marks 2 years since that vote in June 2016. Now, one of the main criticisms of the Remain side is they won't accept that they didn't accept democracy, that they won't accept the result went the way it did. So let me just put on record, I know the Leave side won, and I respect that they won, but this was not a general election, right? This is permanent. So it seems reasonable to ask for a basic thing, which is that people have some say in what the final terms are. And I do not know why the Leave side is so hostile to that. I can understand the Leave side being irritated by the idea of a second referendum, i.e., on membership or not. I understand that. I'm not convinced that's a good idea. But surely we have a right to know the terms of the final Brexit deal. This idea, oh, let's leave now and do two fingers to the EU, let's leave without a deal. I honestly think some of these people forget that we no longer have an empire. We're a great power, but the world is a different place than it was in 1973. That's just a fact. It's not unpatriotic to say that. In fact, I would argue it is patriotic to want the best future for this country. And there are some attitudes from the Leave side that I'm frankly sick of. One of them is this idea that Remainers need to just go into a corner and shut up, or Remoaners, as they like to smear everyone who voted Remain. Um, they say it's not directed at everyone, but it's very polarizing sort of language. Now, I don't call all Leavers Little Englanders. I don't call them all um, ignorant people. I know many decent, intelligent people who voted for Brexit with very valid reasons for doing so. And I'll be honest, when I made my vote, it wasn't. I knew I was going to vote Remain, but it wasn't absolutely, straight in there. I did think it through. I did look carefully at both arguments. Um, So this idea that Remain people need to just be quiet because you lost, that is not how democracy works. It never has been. Um, Now, some people might pick me up on this and say, well, I'm always talking about the Scottish Nationals. I've never said that Scottish Nationals can't have their opinion. I do say that they have to respect the result of the 2014 Scottish referendum. So I would say to my fellow Remainers, we have to respect that the Leave side won, right? So I am consistent in that. But asking questions is legitimate in a democracy. We have never been, it's never been a situation where, the side that loses cannot even ask questions, cannot insist that we have some say about the future of this country. If that's your position, then you're basically talking about a totalitarian state. Um, so looking at this article in the Guardian, and by the way, it's been reported in the Standard as well. So there's no partisan issue going on here in terms of the reporting, at least in terms of sources on this. Thousands of pro-EU marchers have begun to walk from Pall Mall to Parliament to demand a referendum on the terms the terms of Brexit 2 years on from the vote. The People's Vote protests running from Pall Mall to Parliament Square has been organised by increasingly well-funded anti-Brexit groups based at Millbank Tower and led by Open Britain, the successor to the Remain campaign. A People's Vote spokesperson said the 2 years since the referendum have been characterised by arcane parliamentary manoeuvres about this amendment or that amendment, and it was time to take the issue beyond Westminster and back to the people. It comes as pro-Brexit cabinet ministers attempted to pressurise Theresa May to develop a hard Brexit and not to hesitate from abandoning talks with Brussels. Writing in The Sun, Boris Johnson said the Prime Minister must ensure a full British Brexit, while Liam Fox said the UK was not bluffing about being prepared to walk away from talks with Brussels. David Davis told the Express that there's lots going on to make sure the government was ready in case negotiations collapsed. Their party colleague Anna Soubry will be among the speakers at the London March, along with Labour MP David Lammy and the Liberal Democrat leader Sir Vince Cable, while the campaigner Gina Miller and the actor Sir Tony Robinson will also address those present from 2 p.m. So the Remain side is very much cross-party. This can't just be dismissed as loony left or something. This is cross-party. People from all political parties. The Conservatives are obviously deeply divided over this. It's always been, it's a bit like within the Labour context, the influence of unions within the Labour Party and the influence of momentum, etc. Within the Tories, the internal thing has always been about the EU. Um, I don't like the way things are going. I think what is happening is the Leave side are, or I should say, hard leavers. Not everyone on the Leave side, but hard leavers have this mentality of, oh, well, the EU is our enemy. Let's just do two fingers and walk away. These people are prepared to gamble our future no matter what. They want to leave no matter what. They want to leave now no matter what. In other words, they don't give a damn if our relations get strained, if this causes problems for our future relations with our European neighbours. And quite honestly, I wonder about the mentality of people who seem to think that France and Germany are our enemies, but Putin's Russia is secondary to that. I mean, it isn't France and Germany, it isn't the EU that tried to poison a man on our streets. It isn't the EU that has manipulated our media and interfered in our democratic process the way that Russia has. So there are a lot of things I find rather frustrating about the narrative of the Leave side. I think they're very arrogant insofar as they believe they're the only people who are allowed an opinion. That is the message that they're sending out. I want, when we leave the EU, to have good relations with our European neighbours. I don't know why that is something to ridicule. Um, there are areas I don't like about the EU. I think there is too much bureaucracy. I think there is arrogance in Brussels as well. I do believe there is arrogance in Brussels. I think that people like Claude Juncker need to understand, Jean-Claude Juncker, need to understand that people want sovereign rights. And I am absolutely against any concept of a USE. It won't happen, and the idea is absurd. But that's the point. I do think it is way out there. And I think it's only a minority of pro EU people that want that. So I think that's scaremongering by the Leave side talking about a United States of Europe. It isn't going to happen because even pro EU leaders like Macron are against that idea. So it's absurd. I think that's scaremongering actually to try and say we need to leave the EU because of this encroachment towards the USE. Um, there are legitimate questions about the power that the EU has, and certainly I think that when we leave the EU, renegotiating lots of decision making to be back in this country is very important. There are areas such as on criminal justice, for example. I do believe that um, we should be very assertive on, but on the issue of criminal justice, I think a lot of that comes down to, frankly, weak British judges who will not use the sentencing guidelines that they have, and they opt for softer sentences. So I that's another issue I take with Leavers. They blame everything on the EU. I mean, they think that we're not going to have any immigration problems if we leave the EU, that we're not going to have any terrorism problems, that suddenly everything's going to be wonderful. I think that is astonishingly naive. Canada and the United States have had terrorist attacks. They're not in the EU. So it's very naive, I think, to think that as soon as we leave, everything's going to be wonderful, because that is the language that certain Brexiteers tend to use. I try to respect their point of view. I try to I don't come in and say they're all little Englanders, they're all this or that. I certainly don't believe they're all racist. I think that's nonsense. But I'm not going to sit back and accept, being smeared as a remoaner, or this idea that because I voted Remain, I can't have an opinion. If you're of that view, go to hell. I'm sick and tired of the arrogance of certain leavers who think that only they are allowed an opinion. That's not how democracy works, and they're deluded if they think that people who voted Remain are going to be silent. I think we have a basic right to know the outcome of the final deal, to know what we get to say in the final deal. Surely that is a basic right. This is about the future of this country. This is permanent. So those are a few things to think about. This is a partisan video. I'm not going to deny it. I'm not going to pretend that I'm going to be absolutely neutral on this. I am not convinced Brexit is a good idea. I don't see anything positive happening so far. I'm yet to see a Leave person present something really positive. I know that the Prime Minister of Australia, former Prime Minister Tony Abbott, had a piece in one of the newspapers recently saying we need to be optimistic about it. I feel that we're going to have good relations with Commonwealth countries regardless. But this is also about maintaining good relations with our European neighbours. And I just think that I think the Leave side is behaving profoundly arrogantly, like only they are allowed an opinion. And if anyone dares ask questions about Brexit, then, they're not respecting the result, or they're remoaning. I'm not convinced that another referendum is the right idea, but it seems to me this call is for a referendum specifically about the final deal, not to recall the vote itself, but for a final deal. Why not? What are they even so scared of?